Have you ever lost someone and didn't even realize when it happened? No fight, no goodbye, no closure. They were just gone. That person might have been an empath. And if you did this one thing to them, I promise you, they didn't leave suddenly. They left silently, slowly, and permanently. See, empaths are not like everyone else. They don't just hear your words, they feel your intentions. They don't just see your actions, they absorb your energy. And here's the truth nobody tells you. An empath will tolerate more than anyone, but once their limit is crossed, they don't fight. They vanish. They don't walk away the first time you hurt them. That's the part most people misunderstand. An empath feels the sting, but they don't react the way you expect. They pause. They process. They try to understand you instead of defending themselves. While most people pull back, an empath leans in closer. They study your tone, your silence, your behavior. They ask themselves questions you'll never hear. Are they hurting? Did I misunderstand? Maybe they didn't mean it like that. They rewrite your actions into softer meanings just to protect the connection. That's how it starts. Weakness, but with depth. They give you the benefit of the doubt when you don't deserve it. They excuse things that should have been addressed. They forgive things that should have been boundaries. Not because they don't see the problem, but because they see you beyond the problem. They see your wounds. They see your past. They see the version of you that's broken, insecure, struggling. And they choose to love that version, hoping one day you'll rise above it. So the first time you hurt them, they stay. The second time, they explain. The third time, they adjust themselves. They shrink their needs. They lower their expectations. They convince themselves that this is just a phase. But here's what you don't see. Every time you repeat the same behavior, something inside them records it. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a file being saved in the background. They remember the pattern, not just what you did, but how it felt, the tone you used, the way you dismissed them, the moments you chose yourself over them again and again, and still they stay. Because empaths don't give up on people easily. They believe in potential. They believe in change. They believe in healing, even when the evidence says otherwise. So they keep giving chances. But every chance you get is smaller than the last, not because they love you less, but because they're losing themselves more. And this is where the shift begins. It's subtle. You won't notice it right away. They stop reacting the same way. They stop opening up as much. They stop expecting you to understand. They start observing instead of engaging. Because deep down, something doesn't feel right anymore. They begin to connect the dots. This isn't stress. This isn't a bad day. This is who they are choosing to be with me. That realization is heavy. Because now it's no longer about confusion. It's about clarity. And clarity changes everything. They replay the moments in their mind, not to blame you, but to understand the truth they've been avoiding. They see the consistency in your inconsistency. They see how your apologies never match your actions. They see how your words feel empty now. And that's when the pain changes. It's no longer sharp and emotional. It becomes quiet and distant. The kind of pain that doesn't cry anymore. The kind that just accepts. They stop trying to fix things. Not because they don't care, but because they finally understand that they can't fix someone who doesn't see a problem. And that's the moment everything inside them starts to detach. Not all at once, piece by piece. They detach from the hope first, then from the expectation, then from the emotional investment, until one day they're still there physically, but emotionally they've already taken a step back. And you might think everything is fine, because they're not arguing, they're not complaining, they're not asking for anything anymore. But that's not peace. That's distance. That's the beginning of the end. Because an empath doesn't fight when they're done. They go quiet. They watch. They confirm what they already know. That this isn't a mistake anymore, it's a pattern. And patterns don't lie. Patterns reveal priorities. Patterns reveal truth. Patterns reveal how someone really feels about you without them ever saying it. And once an empath sees the pattern clearly, they stop giving chances. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. Because they finally realize something that changes everything. If I keep accepting this, I'm teaching them how to treat me. And that thought hits deeper than any pain you ever caused. Because now it's not just about what you did to them, it's about what they allowed. And they can't unsee that. So they make a decision, a quiet one, a final one. They choose themselves, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. They stop explaining. They stop waiting. They stop coping. They stop giving energy to something that only takes from them. And from the outside, it looks sudden. like they just woke up one day and changed. But in reality, they've been leaving for a long time. Every ignored feeling was a step back. Every repeated hurt was a door closing. Every broken promise was a piece of them walking away until there was nothing left to hold on to. And that's when they leave. Not because of one mistake, but because of a pattern that proved they were never truly safe to begin with. They don't raise their voice when it's over. They lower their presence. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because you won't feel the impact right away. You won't hear the breaking point. You won't get the warning you thought you deserved. You'll just notice something is different. The person who once reacted to everything suddenly reacts to nothing. The messages get shorter. The tone gets flatter. The energy you used to feel from them disappears. And you might think they're just tired, maybe stressed, maybe going through something. But this isn't exhaustion. This is withdrawal, emotional withdrawal, the kind that doesn't make noise but changes everything. Because when an empath starts going quiet, it's not a phase, it's a decision. A decision that has been building for a long time. They didn't wake up like this. They were shaped into this silence moment by moment. Every time they tried to express themselves and felt dismissed, they learned to say less. Every time they opened their heart and felt misunderstood, they learned to close it a little more. Every time they gave their energy and received nothing back, they learned to conserve it. Until one day, silence feels safer than speaking. And once silence feels safe, they don't go back, because now they've realized something powerful. Not everyone deserves access to their emotions, so they stop giving it. We're completely. No more explaining how they feel. No more trying to be understood. No more emotional effort poured into someone who never valued it. And here's where it gets confusing for you, because from the outside, they look calm. No arguments, no complaints, no tension. But what you're actually witnessing is emotional detachment. And detachment doesn't look dramatic. It looks peaceful. Cold, quiet, controlled peace. The kind of peace that comes after someone has already accepted the loss before it even happens. That's why they don't fight anymore. Because fighting requires hope, and they've already let that go. They've already reached the point where explaining feels pointless, where repeating themselves feels exhausting, where expecting change feels unrealistic. So they stop. Not because they don't care, but because they finally understand that caring alone is not enough. And when an empath reaches that level of understanding, their silence becomes final. You'll start noticing it in small ways. They don't ask how your day was anymore. They don't check in like they used to. They don't share their thoughts, their feelings, their little moments. The connection starts to fade. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they're protecting themselves. Because they've learned that every time they invest emotionally, it costs them more than it gives. So they pull back, gently, quietly, but intentionally. And this is the part most people miss. Silence is not the absence of emotion. It's the control of it. They still feel everything, but they've chosen not to express it to you anymore. Because you've shown them, consciously or not, that their emotions are not safe in your hands. And once that trust is broken, an empath doesn't beg for it to be fixed. They remove themselves from the risk. They stop giving you the version of them that cared deeply. They stop offering you the vulnerability you once had access to. They stop letting you see the parts of them that made the connection real. And what's left is distance, a quiet, unspoken distance, where they are still physically present, but emotionally unreachable. And the scariest part? You won't even realize what you've lost until it's too late, because silence doesn't demand attention. It doesn't force you to look at it. It doesn't create urgency. It just, until one day, it becomes permanent. And that's when reality hits. When you try to reach them and there's nothing there. When you try to reconnect and they don't respond the same way. When you realize that the person who once gave you everything is no longer available. Not because they hate you, but because they've outgrown the version of themselves that kept tolerating the same pain. And here's the truth that hits the hardest. They didn't leave when they were loud. They left when they went quiet. That was your last chance. The moment they stopped arguing was the moment they stopped believing. The moment they stopped explaining was the moment they stopped expecting. The moment they stopped reacting was the moment they started detaching. But silence is easy to ignore. So most people do. They mistake it for peace. They mistake it for maturity. They mistake it for everything being finally okay, without realizing that silence was never a sign of things getting better. It was a sign that things were already over. Because an empath's silence is not empty. It's full of everything they chose not to say. every hurt they swallowed, every truth they held back, every realization they kept to themselves. All of it sitting beneath the surface, unspoken, unseen, but deeply real. And once they've said those things to themselves, instead of to you, there's no reason to say them out loud anymore, because the decision has already been made. And that's why when they finally leave, it feels sudden to you. But to them, it was just the final step in a process that started the moment they chose silence over expression. They don't come back after they're done. That's the part people underestimate the most, because you're used to people leaving and returning. You're used to distance, followed by another chance. You're used to mistakes being fixed with apologies. But an empath doesn't work like that. When they detach, it's not emotional drama. It's an emotional conclusion. They didn't just feel something and react. They understood something and decided. And once that decision is made, it doesn't shake, because it wasn't built on impulse. It was built on everything they tolerated before. Every ignored feeling, every broken promise, every moment they questioned themselves just to keep you. All of it led to one realization. This is not where I'm meant to stay. And once an empath reaches that level of clarity, they don't look back. Not because they don't remember the good moments. They do. They remember everything. That's exactly why they leave. Because they've compared the best of you with the pattern of you. And they've accepted the truth that what you showed consistently matters more than what you promised occasionally. And that truth is hard to undo, because it didn't come from anger. It came from awareness. And awareness doesn't disappear just because you miss them. So when you try to come back with apologies, explanations, changed behavior, you're not dealing with the same person anymore. You're dealing with someone who has already grieved you silently while still being there. They've already processed the loss. They've already felt the disappointment. They've already let go internally. So by the time you realize what you had, they've already accepted what they lost. And acceptance is powerful. Because once someone truly accepts something, they stop fighting it. They stop questioning it. They stop hoping it will be different. They just move forward. And that's exactly what an empath does. They move forward with a calm that feels unfamiliar. No bitterness, no revenge, no need to prove anything. Just distance. Clean, quiet, complete distance. And that's what makes it final. Because there's nothing pulling them back anymore. No emotional attachment left to reconnect. No unresolved feelings left to reopen. No what if left to explore. They've answered those questions already, alone, without needing closure from you. And once someone reaches closure on their own, there's no door left open. You can knock, you can explain, you can even change, but you're knocking on something that no longer exists. Because the version of them that stayed is gone. That version of them believed in you, waited for you, excused you. But that version learned. And once it learned, it transformed into someone who chooses peace over attachment, someone who values consistency over promises, someone who understands that love without respect is not love at all. And that version of them doesn't go back, no matter how much time passes, no matter how sincere you sound, no matter how different things might seem. Because they're not making decisions based on how they feel now. They're making decisions based on what they've learned. And what they've learned is permanent. They've learned how it feels to be taken for granted. They've learned how it feels to overgive and underreceive. They've learned how it feels to stay too long in something that was slowly breaking them. And once you learn those lessons deeply, you don't unlearn them just because someone shows up differently. You protect yourself, even if it costs you the connection. Because to an empath, losing you hurts, but losing themselves again would hurt more. And they're not willing to go through that twice. So they choose distance, not out of fear, but out of respect for their own growth. And that's something you can't compete with, because you're not just competing with their feelings anymore. You're competing with their self-worth, and self-worth doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise just because something feels familiar. It doesn't ignore patterns just because memories are strong. It stands firm, even when it's difficult, even when it means walking away from something that once meant everything. And that's why an empath doesn't come back, because going back would mean ignoring everything they finally understood. It would mean reopening wounds they've already healed. It would mean betraying the version of themselves that fought so hard to let go. And they won't do that. Not again. So when they leave, it's not a pause, it's not space, it's not a test. It's the end of their emotional investment, completely. And you might wait. You might think time will change things. You might believe that eventually they'll miss you enough to return. But that's not how it works. Because they already miss you. They just don't need you anymore. And that difference changes everything, because missing someone doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it just means accepting that what you had was real, but no longer right. And an empath understands that better than anyone. So they carry the memories, they carry the lessons, they carry the growth, but they don't carry you anymore, because they've already put you down in the only place that doesn't hurt them anymore, the past,